And let's be fair, Kevin, and with all due respect, things are a little bit messy at Arsenal at the moment, and it's not just because of the defeat to Brentford last week. And Jamie O'Hara, in fact, well, he was reported saying that Arsenal is a banter FC, claiming that they've spent beyond 100 million, 135 million to be exact, just to buy a B squad. I mean, do you agree with that? Do you see it that way?
No, that's his opinion, which is fine. It's fine that anybody could have their opinion, but I totally disagree. When you look at what Arsenal are actually buying, you're buying Ramsdale, who is an England goalkeeper. He's not the first choice, but he's one of the England goalkeepers. You know, you're buying Martin Odegaard, who was a child prodigy, who Real Madrid spent a lot of money on. He is a wonderful player. He was at Arsenal last season for 6 months, helped Arsenal, knows the club. They understand him. He understands the football club. And for 30 million, I think that's a bargain myself. Now, I think Jamie O'Hara's got a very short memory, because I think Spurs have a certain player who they've paid, 50-odd, 60 million for, who is not even getting a shirt at the moment. Now, that is more of a problem than the likes of Odegaard, etc. So I think that where the clubs are at the moment, I think Arsenal need to strengthen. Arsenal need bodies in. But the problem, because of COVID, is getting bodies out. I think that's the real problem Arsenal have. But, you know, I'm not worried about what Jamie O'Hara thinks about bringing people in, that's for sure.
Well, be careful what you say there, Kevin, about Spurs, because we have a Spurs man here alongside us, Gary.
Oh, I know, Michelle. I know he's a Spurs man. But one thing Gary is a football man, and he knows his football, that's for sure.
Yeah, I think, you know, when I look at Arsenal Football Club, I look at, you know, a big squad of players, a lot of talented players, but I'm not sure I particularly see a team there at the moment. You know, they've also signed Ben White, who's a fantastic talent, but still very young and new to the game, in that he played last season down at Brighton in the Premier League. He played the season before at Leeds United in the Championship, had 2 great seasons, and he's come into the Arsenal setup. And it's going to take him some time to settle, to be honest with you. So I see Arsenal spending a lot of money. They've collected more good players, some very talented players. But what it's actually done, because they haven't been able to get rid of some of what they feel is the deadwood, they've just inflated their squad number-wise with more players. And having a huge squad of players is really, really difficult to manage. And, you know, Arteta is trying to get Arsenal Football Club back on track, but it's one hell of a job.
Yeah, that's the thing, isn't it, Kevin? Because Arsenal not being able to sort of get people off their wage bill, get people out of the club that is deadwood, like Gary said. Arsenal have put themselves in a very difficult situation at the moment, with a very bloated sort of club.
Yeah, and the problem Arsenal have is, it is a legacy. It's the legacy of the transfers and recruitment that have happened pre-Mikel Arteta. Now, Mikel Arteta, unfortunately, he's the one who has to try and make it work. One, he has to build a squad who can compete, and 2, he has to try and get the dead wood out. And then you put into the mix COVID restrictions. Clubs are watching the money now, because they've had no fans in for a season and a bit. It's a very difficult task. And as Gary rightly said, it is very difficult to manage a bloated squad of players. But I honestly think they're going to have to get the shift on. They're going to have to get moving very quickly. Even if this player's out on loan, they're going to have to trim that squad down, because it's too big.
Yeah, because it just seems a bit like a deja vu of bad transfer business in the past, like the whole Ozil situation as well, and how difficult it was to get him out of the club. It just seems to be the same situation once again. But with the amount of money that's being spent under Mikel Arteta this time round, they are the biggest spenders in the Premier League. Surely Arteta has got to deliver results. When you look at the signings, when you look at this team that Arteta has, is it good enough for them to battle for the top 4? Is it good enough for a guaranteed, almost guaranteed position in the top 4?
Not at the moment. Not at the moment, I'll be honest with you. Michelle, I still think there's holes in that team. There is a question mark over the application and the battle hardiness of Arsenal. We saw it last week at Brentford, where nice on the ball, but the game is twofold. You have to be able to be good without the ball when the opposition have it. And Arsenal are just not good enough in that sense. Obviously, you had Lacazette and Aubameyang not in the squad last week, so you were weakened at the top end of the pitch. But Arsenal, they just couldn't do the basics right last week. And the quicker Gabriel and Partey can come into that team to make it a lot more stable. I think the right back is a big problem at Arsenal as well. Gary's more of a defender. Gary could tell you what a good right back could do. A good right back settles down the back four, settles down the centre half. I think Arsenal are missing a trick by not getting a quality right back.
Yeah, the thing is, as on top of the financial as well, in terms of being able to deliver for Arteta, it builds more pressure onto him as well. And what does this mean? Him spending so much, what does it mean in terms of the security of his job if he doesn't deliver, Kevin, this season?
Look, this is one thing I will say. This is his team now. There are still players from the old regime, but he's spent in, 2 or 3 windows, he's brought players in. So now this is his team, this is his squad. The pressure is on for him to deliver 100%. Of course, we know managers don't get enough time, but I still feel he's going to get a little bit of time. We've only had one game. Second game is against Chelsea tomorrow. Third game is against Manchester City. So I still believe he's going to get enough time to try and bed these players in, because one thing any manager needs, he needs his best 11 out on the football pitch, Gary. What do you think?
Gary, do you think this is...
Well, Kevin's right. Managers need time. They don't tend to get enough time. What is enough time? Who is actually signing the players at Arsenal Football Club? I hope that the biggest decision maker is Mikel Arteta, because it has to be his team that goes on the pitch. But with directors of football and various other, segments of a football club, a lot of people are having big influences. But I tend to agree with Kevin that, Arteta's been there long enough to start to see some changes, to see his team on the park. And of course, everybody's starting to judge Arsenal this season because they lost their first game away at newly promoted Brentford. And of course, they have, as Kevin's just mentioned, 2 very testing games in their next 2 games against Chelsea and Manchester City. Then there's the international break, which again doesn't help coaches particularly, because players are flying all over the show and they're away from the club and they can't do any team functional work, and some maybe come back injured. But every manager has to deal with that. I guess if you're asking me, how long does Mikel Arteta have? Well, I think there needs to be some clear signs that Arsenal are threatening to be in the top 6 of the Premier League come Christmas. And if they're not really threatening to be in there come Christmas, I don't think his future looks particularly bright, to be honest with you. Having said that, what is the policy of Stan Kroenke at Arsenal Football Club? Is he gonna stick with Arteta, or is it, because every time you change, it's your backroom staff that changes. They want different players in. It's monstrous.
It was a process all over again, isn't it?
Yeah. And the biggest problem is that, Mr. Kroenke doesn't say anything, isn't seen, isn't heard. And of course, that gives very little confidence to anybody in and around that football club.
Any chance he speaks to you, Kevin?
I would love to have a really good conversation with Mr. Kroenke, because I think there are, look, we understand, it's not as though Arsenal haven't spent money. Arsenal have spent money in the past as well. It's how they spend money. So whatever they've spent in this window up to now, they're still playing catch up with the other big boys, because Arsenal have been so far behind, it's been crazy. So they're still just trying to catch up without spending the really big money on the big players, because they can't get them because they're not in the Champions League.